You guys got to go.
A balanced perspective is the key to understanding the contemporary surveillance society in which we live in. The failures of surveillance, the second wave, faulty bureaucracy over human life. To be honest, does this sound like a balanced perspective to you? Let's take a moment to remember that surveillance and security is enhancing and improving its ways to get better every day. Surveillance is defined as close observation, especially of a suspect or a crime. In this instant, who is the suspect that caused the crime of the second wave? Hotel quarantine was the first failure of many, specifically the immaturity of selected security implemented in place. Hotel quarantine was definitely the main trigger of the second wave. Travellers returning to Melbourne were unguarded as they freely walked the streets to get coffee and exercise. Then the Premier told the state that it is our fault for the start of the second wave. A balanced society with an economy open with an average of 4.7 cases a day gets blamed for the cause of the second wave, even though the man himself pulled the trigger about quarantine as he believed he had nothing to do with it. Even today on one of Andrews' press, he was asked about why no one knew about the inquiry of the ADF assistance in hotel quarantine. He replies, "I am no state to answer that." Airport travel. Dr. Nispolin from Sky News Australia discussed how extra security and surveillance are needed to be put in place. This was back on Feb 1st. Now, with an increase of 20,000 cumulative cases, there is only one source of blame. He goes on by saying, travel should not be permitted to the original source of China. Okay. In terms of airport security and travel, Queensland's Chief Health Officer, Jeanette Young, has given travel exemptions to Australian football players and actors because they bring a lot of money into the state. Let's roll the tape.
I have given travel exemptions to people like actors and AFL football players because, we need to start that process again. Of course they're going to be quarantined for 2 weeks, but, they also bring a lot of money into the state as well.
Embarrassing. You just gotta feel sorry for the woman. Clearly unfit for the job, should be kicked out. So not only does this demonic bureaucracy happen every single day, but a young middle-aged girl cannot even be given an exemption to attend her own dad's funeral. Tell me the sustained balance in this. Australians are relying too much on bureaucratic ministers to run our state who have no experience within the field of health and infectious diseases. CHO Young was given the role before the job was even a health thing. The curfew was the next failure, as apparently it was implemented based off health advice. But Brett Sutton called bullshit.
Nothing has been applied against my advice. The state of curfew came in as a requirement of the state of disaster, and definitely not a requirement for the state of emergency. But from a health perspective, I'm definitely not against it whatsoever.
Then Andrews said it was based off the Victorian Police Commission. Shane Patton called bullshit. Remember, the curfew restriction was implemented to provide a lowering in the number of people out within the community for unlawful reasons. But once the Premier was questioned about where the curfew came from, not being from health advice or the police commission, he said he didn't know who implemented it. If he doesn't even know, why is he still in office? The other argument, the curfew was put in place for financial benefit for the police force. Working overtime allows economic benefit. If the Cabinet of Victoria do not have a valuable reason for the curfew to be in, don't you think Victorians shouldn't have to be under surveillance 24 hours a day? And technology constantly developing, it is no doubt that we can't even leave our houses without being arrested by the police. For example, the pregnant woman that was arrested in her own home in front of her 2 children and her husband. After initial questioning, they found out she was holding a rally arguing against anti-mask wearers and how they shouldn't be protesting in them cities anyway. In terms of aged care, the Premier said today that aged care is pretty well locked down now. But what I find interesting is that how has it taken an extra 4 months for this to happen? You reject the Australian Defence Force assistance after multiple times Scott Morrison tried to contact you email by email. He never answered. The current surveillance right now is that we have very strict protocols. Yes, Premier, but what are these strict protocols? Contract tracing is improving and doing well, but in terms of surveillance targets, one aged care facility with 1 case of coronavirus is considered an outbreak. But why is a rally of protesters of 400 people, one person could have it and it spreads between everyone? But why is that allowed? The COVID Safe app. The app was implemented by Australia's federal government. in order to track virus from a person up to 15 kilometers. Let's do a quick review, shall we? Fail? Yes, the app was a complete fail, and a complete waste of time as well, completely not achieving anything whatsoever. Ranked in the top 10 worst contact tracing devices in the world actually. The failure puts severe doubts in the minds of Victorians as they are still experiencing the worst parts of the pandemic effects. We have just received information that the Premier has rejected the eradication of the 9 PM curfew in the state's attempt to reconcile with the Premier. The Premier went on by saying, "That's all Victorians are allowed to do, is read a book until 9:30 and that's it." Is this basically telling us the Premier is even trying to control our own lives now? Because now it feels like, under the watchful eye of the Premier, we're not allowed to do anything but go to bed and work in our own homes. Is this fair? Is this even legal? To be telling us what time do we need to be going to bed? What we need to be doing at night? Has all this power just gotten to his head? To conclude, surveillance has continued to have a massive impact on the economy, businesses and humans' lives. It almost feels like in order to reach that balanced perspective we talk about of having surveillance as part of our society, we are going to need to put constant surveillance in for 22 hours a day. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section of the video and what you think were the major surveillance upsets causing the second wave. This has been Liam Stott, and make sure you do subscribe, leave a like, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.